I was driving home that night around 2 in the morning. The road outside of town was long and empty, just a straight stretch that cut through farmland and patches of forest. The moon barely showed through a heavy blanket of clouds, leaving everything dim, gray, and shadowy. The only sound in the car was the low hum of the tires rolling over asphalt, a steady monotone that I usually found comforting. That night, though, it felt oppressive, almost like the sound was stretching into the darkness ahead and pulling me with it. I remember the air inside the car felt thick, not physically but somehow heavy, like the night itself was pressing in. I had the heat on low, not because I was cold, but because the fogged windows made it hard to see anything without it. My eyes kept scanning the road ahead, but there was nothing. No other cars, no streetlights, no signs of life beyond the faint outlines of trees swaying against the gray sky. Then far ahead I saw her. She was standing at the side of the road, and I swear I would have kept driving if I hadn't caught a strange, frozen stillness about her posture. She was young, wearing a coat that looked too thin for the cold night air, and her thumb was out, motionless. I felt my stomach tighten. There was something wrong about the way she stood, too rigid, too silent, like she had been waiting there for hours. I slowed down, rolling the window down, trying to keep my hands steady on the wheel. I asked if she needed a ride. She didn't answer. She just nodded and got into the back seat. I remember feeling a chill when the door closed. It wasn't the air coming in. It wasn't anything I could place exactly, just a feeling that made my skin crawl. She didn't speak, didn't shift in her seat, didn't even glance at me. She just sat there, staring straight ahead at nothing. I tried to make small talk at first, asking where she was going, if she had a name, anything to break the silence. Nothing. She didn't respond. I noticed the hair at the back of her neck, the way it was damp and stuck to her collar. I could feel her presence, heavy and silent, behind me, and I started to feel an edge of panic that I didn't quite want to admit. The first 10 minutes passed slowly. The road stretched ahead like a black ribbon, headlights cutting through the low-hanging clouds. I kept checking the rearview mirror, not for her, but for some reassurance that the car wasn't empty, that I wasn't imagining the weight of someone behind me. Each glance made my chest tighten a little more. I remembered my GPS saying 40 minutes to get home. 40 minutes with this silence pressing against me like it could crush me. I tried focusing on anything else, the rhythm of the tires, the way the wind brushed the edges of the car, the occasional crackle from the heater vent. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Then, halfway through the drive, I glanced again in the rearview mirror, and my stomach dropped. The back seat was empty. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it, that the shadows had played some trick on my eyes. But I knew it wasn't a trick. The coat I had seen, the shape of her shoulders, the way the seat had dipped when she sat, none of that was there. The silence in the car suddenly felt too loud, like it was screaming at me. My hands tightened on the wheel. I swerved slightly, almost hitting the shoulder of the road. I forced myself to stop the car at the next exit, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I got out, the cold night air biting my skin. I walked to the back of the car, my eyes scanning the black stretch of highway behind me. Nothing. No coat, no figure, no footprints in the gravel. The road was empty, just as it had been before. I walked a little further, down the shoulder, peering into the shadows between the trees, the grass tall and wet with dew. There was no one, not a sign of her anywhere. I went back to the car and sat inside, shaking. My hands didn't stop trembling as I drove again, constantly checking the back seat. The emptiness behind me felt impossible, but I couldn't deny it. I was hyper-aware of every movement, every sound. A rustle in the trees made me flinch. A shadow along the road made my stomach lurch. My mind started racing, thinking of every possibility. Had I been hallucinating? Was I just tired? But the memory of her stillness, the damp hair, the coat, was too vivid. By the time I got home, I could barely move. I parked the car in the driveway and sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the dark street ahead. The house felt strangely distant, like it was just a fragile barrier between me and the night outside. I didn't sleep that night, kept waking up to check the back seat, even though I was home. Every sound from the street or the yard made me jump. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I went online, searching for reports of missing people, accidents, anything that could explain the night. That's when I found it. A woman matching her description had vanished on the same stretch of highway just a month ago. She had been reported last seen by someone driving home at night, a long empty road, coat, thumb out. No trace of her had been found since. It was a cold, sinking realization. I kept going over the drive in my head, thinking of what could have happened if I had kept going, or if I had let her in my car. The silence, the stillness of her, the way she hadn't moved once, none of it fit any normal situation. And yet, there she had been, briefly real, briefly in my car, and then gone. I thought of calling the police, telling them what happened, but what could I say? That a woman got into my car at 2 a.m., said nothing, and disappeared in the middle of the drive. They would think I was hallucinating or lying. I tried to convince myself it had been a trick of the shadows, a trick of my own mind in the middle of the night. But every detail was too sharp to ignore. Her coat, the way she sat, the feeling of someone breathing behind me, the way my stomach had twisted. It wasn't a dream. Weeks went by. I avoided that highway at night, taking longer routes, even leaving late at night only if I had no choice. Every time I thought about that night, my chest would tighten and my hands would shake. It stayed with me in subtle ways, the silent roads, the weight of being alone, the knowledge that something or someone could be there and vanish without explanation. I never saw her again. No one ever saw her again. And even now, when I drive alone at night, I can't help but glance in the rearview mirror, half expecting the back seat to be empty, or half expecting it to be exactly the same as that night. The memory doesn't fade, not because it was supernatural, not because it was imagined, but because it was real enough to remind me that people can disappear in ways that make no sense at all. That highway isn't just a road anymore, it's a place where normal rules stop, where silence can hold someone, and then release them, leaving you wondering if what you saw ever existed. The story doesn't have a neat ending, because life rarely does. The woman vanished, and I survived, and every night drive after that carries the same tension, the same unshakable awareness that there are moments where reality tilts, and nothing about them can be fully explained. And that knowledge stays with you. It sits behind your eyes and settles into your chest, a reminder that some parts of the world are stranger, darker, and more fragile than you want to admit. Even years later, the memory of that night, the figure in the coat, silent, unmoving, follows me like a shadow I can't shake. I learned that some encounters leave you permanently changed, not because of fear, but because the memory of real, unexplained events doesn't fade. You never really forget someone who disappears in front of you, even when they were silent the entire time. I had been driving for hours, my body aching and my eyes heavy with exhaustion. It was late November, just past midnight, and I was taking a rural road I had driven before, though not often at night. The woods pressed close on both sides of the narrow two-lane highway, and the moonlight was weak behind thick clouds, barely illuminating the way. The temperature had dropped, and my breath fogged slightly inside the car. I was going about 55 miles per hour, just trying to get home. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, but my mind was wandering, tired and unfocused. I knew deer were common in this area, especially at night, but I had driven it many times and figured I would be fine if I stayed alert. I was not fully alert. I was tired, too tired for this road. The trees on either side blurred together in my peripheral vision. The headlights of my car cut through the darkness, illuminating patches of the road ahead. Every so often, I would see the reflective eyes of a small animal or a bird, and my heart would skip, but nothing dangerous had come yet. Then it happened. A deer exploded from the edge of the woods directly in front of me. It came out of nowhere, and I had barely any time to react. I swerved instinctively, jerking the wheel to the right and stomping on the brake. The tires screamed against the asphalt, and the back end of the car fishtailed slightly. The road had a ditch on the shoulder, which I didn't notice in the panic, and my rear right tire caught the lip of the ditch. The car tilted sharply. My stomach lurched as the momentum carried me off the road. The front of my car clipped a tree, not head-on, but enough to crush the front right side and crumple the bumper. The sound was sickening, a sharp crunch followed by the engine sputtering. I froze, every nerve in my body screaming. The car rocked slightly as it came to a rest, tires stuck awkwardly in the mud at the edge of the ditch. I could smell the faint scent of oil and something burnt, and the cold November air rushed in from the broken window. My adrenaline surged. My chest heaved as I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, unsure what to do first. The woods around me were silent except for the distant rustle of leaves in the wind and the occasional snapping of a twig, perhaps another animal. My mind raced with the what-ifs, imagining being stuck out here until morning, or worse. No other cars passed. No headlights appeared in the distance. The isolation was total, suffocating. I tried my phone, hoping for some signal to call for help. Nothing. No service, no bar, nothing. I had been careless, assuming I could just drive home and everything would be fine. Now I was cold, soaked in mud from the impact, and alone on a quiet rural road. I unbuckled my seatbelt slowly, trying not to make sudden movements. My legs felt stiff and numb from the cramped position, and my shoes were muddy from where I had brushed against the wet ground. After a few minutes of sitting, heart still racing, I decided I had no choice but to leave the car. I grabbed my coat, which was barely a shield against the November cold, and stepped into the mud. My boots sank slightly with every step, and the chill seeped immediately through my socks. I realized quickly that even if I walked a few hundred feet, I would need to keep moving to stay warm. I walked along the road, keeping the ditch on my left, hoping to see any sign of light or life. The darkness felt heavier with every step, the woods pressing closer as if to swallow the road itself. My breath came out in small clouds, and my legs ached from trudging through the mud. The road curved slightly, and in the distance, faint but unmistakable, I saw a glow. It was a house, small, set back from the road, with a single porch light burning steadily. Relief flooded me, but I kept walking cautiously, not wanting to slip or fall. By the time I reached the yard, mud caked my boots, my hands were numb, and my face stung from the cold wind. I pounded on the door, shivering violently. Eventually, someone inside noticed and came to help. They didn't ask many questions, just offered warmth, a towel, and the use of their phone. I called a tow truck. While waiting, I sat wrapped in blankets, sipping the hot tea they had offered. The car, I realized, was likely totaled. The front side had taken the brunt of the impact, and the tires were lodged in the ditch at an awkward angle. I had no choice but to wait for professional help. The house, the warmth, the simple safety of a human presence, was a sharp contrast to the terror of the woods. By the time the tow truck arrived, it was nearly dawn. The driver assessed the car quickly and began the slow process of pulling it out of the ditch. I stayed back, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun rise behind the trees. The woods, which had felt so threatening and suffocating just a few hours before, now glowed in soft morning light. The cold was still there, but it no longer felt menacing. Eventually, the car was loaded onto the tow truck. I followed behind it in the driver's seat of the truck, watching the road ahead. The memory of the deer, the sudden panic, and the crash lingered, but it was tempered by the relief of having made it out alive. When I finally reached home, I cleaned up and sat quietly for a long while, thinking about how close I had come to serious injury or worse. Driving that road again, even in daylight, still makes my stomach tighten. The memory is etched deeply, a sharp reminder of how quickly a normal night can turn dangerous, and how easily exhaustion and distraction can lead to disaster. But I also carry a sense of quiet gratitude. I survived. I found help. I learned to respect the roads and the wildlife that share them. I learned to never underestimate isolation, fatigue, or the suddenness of danger. That night could have ended very differently, and I think about it often, not with fear as much as with awareness. I don't drive that road late at night anymore, unless absolutely necessary. I check my car thoroughly before long trips. I keep extra blankets and a phone charger, and I stay alert, no matter how familiar the road seems. That near-death moment, frozen in the dark with the woods pressing in around me, changed me. I drive more cautiously now, more aware of how fragile safety can be, and more grateful for the simple act of reaching home alive. The scar it left isn't visible, but it shapes how I approach the night, the road, and the quiet danger of the world around me. Even now, I remember the crunch of metal against the tree, the flash of white fur in my headlights, the feeling of mud seeping into my boots, and the desperate, cold trek to that distant porch light. It was terrifying, but it was real, and I survived. I had just finished a long day at work and was driving home late at night. It was around 11:30 p.m., and the roads were nearly empty, which was normal for the rural area I live in. The highway I usually take is a narrow, two-lane road that winds through stretches of forest and farmland, with very few houses and almost no streetlights. The dark stretched on around me, broken only by the dim glow of my headlights cutting through the night. I had been driving for about 20 minutes, my body tired, my mind already half dreaming of being in my bed. The air in the car smelled faintly of coffee and the leftover sandwich I had eaten in the afternoon. The hum of the engine and the soft rhythm of the tires on asphalt were almost comforting, familiar sounds that made the drive feel safe. Then, without realizing it, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. On a highway like this, it wasn't unusual for another car to pass or follow for a few miles. But something about these lights felt different. They seemed too close. No matter how I adjusted my speed, whether slowing down slightly or keeping a steady pace, the headlights stayed almost glued to mine. My heart rate picked up a little, and I found myself checking the rear-view mirror more often than usual. I tried to tell myself it was probably just another driver who was tired or maybe in a hurry. I sped up slightly, just to put some distance between us. That should have made the car fall back, I thought. Instead, it mirrored my movements almost perfectly. When I slowed, the headlights stayed the same distance behind me. When I accelerated, they kept pace. Every turn I made, the car followed in a way that felt deliberate, calculated. I reached a small town a few miles down the highway, thinking that the extra streetlights and traffic might shake the car off. I took a few turns, going through streets I knew well, hoping that by weaving through the town the car would either pass me or disappear into the night. But the headlights followed every move I made. My stomach sank with a tightening knot of fear. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other trembling slightly. I didn't want to overreact, but I knew there was something wrong. At some point, I remembered a friend I could call, someone who could at least hear me and maybe give me a bit of comfort. I grabbed my phone, keeping my eyes on the road as best I could while dialing. The call connected, and I explained the situation quickly, my voice tight, trying not to let panic take over. I told her that there was a car behind me that wouldn't leave me alone, that it had been following me for minutes. She said something, but I barely heard it. I was too focused on the road and the headlights behind me. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles whitening with tension. The highway stretched ahead, dark and empty, and the forest on either side seemed to close in. I noticed that the occasional branches or leaves brushing against the edges of the road created shadows that made it hard to see clearly. Every now and then, a deer or small animal would dart across the road, making me jerk the wheel slightly in surprise. Each time, I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting the car to hit me, but it just followed, steady and unyielding. I tried thinking rationally. Maybe the driver was just lost. Maybe they didn't notice they were following me so closely. Maybe it wasn't anything at all. But as I watched the headlights stay glued to mine, I knew something about this was deliberate. The car wasn't just behind me. It was tracking me, matching my movements almost perfectly. My thoughts raced faster than my heartbeat. I knew I couldn't keep driving like this forever. I needed a safe place, somewhere with people, lights, and cameras, somewhere that would break the pattern. Then I remembered a small gas station, just off the highway a few miles ahead. I had stopped there before, late at night, and it was always quiet but never empty. It had a bright, fluorescent light outside, and the tiny bell over the door that chimed when someone entered. It wasn't much, but it was a place where I could be seen, where someone would notice if something happened. I took the exit, my hands trembling slightly, and turned the wheel toward the station. The car behind me followed. I didn't slow down at first, afraid that if I did, the car would crowd me even closer. Instead, I pulled into the lot as quickly as I could, leaving my hazards on. I parked near the front of the building, my heart hammering in my chest. The headlights that had been so persistent stopped at the entrance to the highway, almost as if the driver realized I had stopped somewhere that wasn't so easy to follow. I didn't wait to see what they would do next. I grabbed my bottle of water and stepped inside the gas station. The fluorescent lights were harsh, but felt like a shield against the darkness outside. I could hear the hum of the refrigerators and the soft tapping of the clerk's keyboard. I tried to calm my breathing, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. I stayed inside for a few minutes, just long enough to collect myself and feel a little safer knowing there were people around. When I finally stepped back outside, the lot was empty. The car, the headlights, the looming presence that had haunted me for the last 10 or 15 minutes was gone. My chest felt tight, and the adrenaline left my body in a wave that made my knees weak. I got back into my car, locking the doors immediately, and sat for several minutes, letting the shaking subside. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting the lights to appear again, but they didn't. I started driving home slowly, carefully, keeping my eyes glued to the road and my hands firmly on the wheel. The highway seemed less threatening now, illuminated by the few faint streetlights that dotted the route. The forest around me still pressed close, but I felt a cautious sense of relief. I was still tense, still alert, but the immediate danger was gone. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. The lights of my house felt like a fortress, a boundary between me and the night outside. I sat in my car for a long moment, just listening to the silence and letting my body settle. The memory of the headlights following me was still vivid, the fear still lingering in my chest, but at least it was over. Once inside, I made sure every door and window was locked, then finally allowed myself to breathe normally. I drank some water, washed my face, and tried to shake the tension from my body. It took a while before I felt calm again, but eventually I did. I never saw the car or those headlights again, and I started leaving a little earlier or taking slightly different routes, just to avoid that stretch of road late at night. The memory stayed with me, though, a reminder of how quickly something ordinary could turn into a terrifying situation, and how important it was to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. That night, I realized how alone you really can feel on a dark, empty road, and how relief can come from the simplest things: lights, people, and the safety of home. I had just finished a long work trip and was exhausted. My body felt like it had been drained of every ounce of energy I had, and all I wanted was to get home, shower, and collapse into my own bed. The highway had been long and monotonous, a string of taillights and occasional trucks cutting through the darkness. I had taken the same route many times before, but this time my GPS suggested a shortcut, a narrow winding road that cut through a thick patch of woods. I figured it would save me half an hour at most, and at that point, I didn't care. Anything that would get me home faster sounded perfect. The road started off fine. Just a typical rural lane lined with trees that arched over, forming a tunnel of shadows. There were no streetlights, but I had driven dark country roads before. My headlights swept across the asphalt, illuminating small patches of the road at a time. I could see a few fallen leaves, branches that had been blown over by the wind, and occasional potholes. At first, I didn't mind. It was quiet, peaceful even, a kind of relief from the endless monotony of the highway. My mind wandered while I drove, replaying the week's meetings, the deadlines, and the small annoyances that had piled up. Then slowly the road began to change. The smooth asphalt gave way to cracked tarmac, potholes appeared more frequently, and larger branches littered the road. My tires rattled and bounced as I carefully maneuvered around obstacles, keeping my speed down. The trees pressed closer together on both sides, the underbrush so thick I could barely see anything beyond the edge of the road. Every shadow seemed to shift as my headlights passed over it, and I felt my pulse start to quicken. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I had driven enough night roads to know nothing was actually there, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. My phone started to die. The battery had already been low after a long day of emails and calls, and now, with barely 30% left, it shut off completely. No GPS, no signal, nothing. My chest tightened. I realized I had no idea where I was, no way to know if I was anywhere near a town, or if I would just be driving in circles. I tried to calm myself, taking deep breaths and keeping my eyes on the road, but the darkness felt heavier now. The trees seemed taller, the shadows longer. Every rustle in the underbrush or snapping of a twig made me flinch. Then I saw it, a house up ahead. Dim light spilled from the windows, and there was a car parked in the driveway. Relief flooded me immediately. I slowed down and parked in front of it. The lights on made it seem like someone was home, and I felt a spark of hope that I could get directions, or even just a moment to rest. I got out and walked to the front door, my footsteps crunching on the gravel. I knocked, and after a moment, a man appeared. He looked normal at first, maybe a little older than me, dressed in casual clothes. He didn't say much, just moved aside to let me in. There was a faint smell of old wood, and something like burnt coffee. He showed me a place to sit and a plug to charge my phone. I didn't think much about him at the time. I was tired, my body aching from sitting in the car for hours, my mind worn down by stress. I plugged in my phone and watched the small battery icon start to fill. But when I looked up, the room had changed. The house no longer looked the same. The hallway was longer, darker, and the furniture seemed to have shifted. There were doors I didn't notice before, walls where there had been open space. The lighting was different, colder, harsher. My stomach dropped. I turned to look at the man, but he was gone. The room was empty, silent except for the faint hum of my phone charging. My pulse raced as panic started to rise in my chest. I backed away slowly, then ran. I didn't stop to look around, didn't check for keys or any sign of the man. I rushed to the door, swung it open, and sprinted to my car. The gravel crunched under my feet, branches scraped against my arms, and every sound seemed louder than it should have been. My hands trembled as I started the engine and tore down the road in the opposite direction, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The road seemed endless. Every turn brought the same thick darkness, the same oppressive feeling of being enclosed by the woods. I kept my headlights on high beam, scanning for any signs of a main road, any sign of life. Hours could have passed. I wasn't sure. Time felt distorted. My exhaustion mixed with fear until I couldn't tell if I had been driving for 10 minutes or an hour. I kept thinking I would find something, a sign, a break in the trees, any indication that I was getting closer to civilization. Finally, I saw it, a faint glimmer of streetlights ahead. My relief was immense. I drove faster, my eyes scanning eagerly for familiar markers, houses, anything that would tell me I was back on a road I knew. The trees finally thinned out, and the road widened. The asphalt was smoother. I recognized the layout immediately, a section of highway I had driven countless times. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, slumping back in my seat. I didn't look back, didn't want to think about what had happened, or what that house had been. I kept my eyes on the road, driving home with every ounce of attention I could muster. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I stayed in the car for several minutes, just breathing, letting my hands relax from the tight grip on the wheel. I kept replaying the events in my mind, questioning whether I had imagined some of it, but everything felt real. The road, the darkness, the sudden change in the house. I went inside, locked the doors, and turned on every light I could find. I made myself dinner, double-checked my doors and windows, and didn't touch my phone until it was fully charged. I stayed awake that night, sitting in my living room with a blanket wrapped around me, replaying every detail in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I had stayed even a few more minutes in that house, I might not have found my way out. Since that night, I've never taken shortcuts through the woods after dark. I stick to the main roads, even if it takes longer. I've told a few friends about it, and some think I was just tired, that my mind played tricks on me. Maybe it did. But I know the way that road made me feel, the way the house felt wrong, the way time and space seemed to stretch unnaturally. That was not imagination. It was real enough for me. Real enough to make me drive an extra hour every night just to stay safe. I never want to feel that kind of fear behind the wheel again. That night taught me something important. Some shortcuts aren't worth it. Some roads, no matter how inviting they look on a map, hide things you don't want to find. I got lucky. I got out, and I've never been so careful about where I drive and when. I was driving home late one night, around 1 in the morning, on a stretch of rural highway that I knew well. The rain was falling in heavy sheets, pounding on the roof of my car and making it hard to see more than a few dozen feet ahead. My windshield wipers were moving as fast as they could, but the downpour seemed almost relentless, a constant blur of silver lines across the glass. The road was empty, quiet except for the hum of my tires on wet asphalt and the occasional splash when I hit a puddle. I had left a friend's house after a long day, tired and anxious to get home, and now the solitude of the dark, wet road pressed down on me like a weight. As I drove, I noticed the reflection of headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was another car just passing somewhere behind me, but then I realized the lights weren't fading. They were getting closer. I glanced again and saw a large semi-truck tailing me, its headlights bright and piercing through the rain. It was close enough that I could see the shape of the trailer, dark and looming behind me. My stomach tightened. I knew this highway wasn't busy at night, especially in this weather. There shouldn't be anyone here. I moved slightly to the shoulder, giving the truck room to pass. I hoped that it would continue on and leave me alone, but it didn't. It stayed right there, following exactly as I had feared. I pressed my foot harder on the accelerator, trying to put some distance between myself and the truck. My heart was pounding, my knuckles white around the wheel. The wipers streaked my view back and forth as I tried to keep my eyes on the road, and the rain made every turn and dip of the road more treacherous. The truck stayed behind me, matching my speed perfectly. Panic began to creep in. I considered taking the next turnoff to a side road, but in this part of the countryside, side roads were narrow, winding, and poorly lit. There was no guarantee they would help, and I didn't know how far I would have to go before I reached somewhere safe. Then I saw it, the glowing sign of a gas station up ahead, a little oasis of light in the endless darkness and rain. My relief was immediate, but it didn't last long. I turned into the station as quickly as I could, tires squealing slightly on the wet pavement. I parked close to the pumps, hoping the presence of lights and maybe other people would discourage whoever, or whatever was following me. But as soon as I came to a stop and took a deep breath, trying to calm the adrenaline that had my heart hammering in my chest. I looked up and saw the truck pull in right behind me. It slowed and idled near the curb, engine rumbling low, lights cutting sharply across the wet asphalt. My stomach sank. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so tightly it hurt my hands. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing with every scenario, none of them good. The truck's cab was dark, and no one stepped out. There was no sound of a door opening, no footsteps on the wet ground, just that low, menacing hum of the diesel engine and the relentless pounding of rain on the roof of my car. My foot hovered over the brake, my fingers fidgeted on the wheel, but I didn't dare move. I stayed there, staring at the truck, hoping that someone from the gas station would notice and come outside. Minutes passed like hours. Every time I thought about opening my door and running, I imagined the truck moving, the driver leaning out, and I felt myself freeze again. My mind kept cycling through possibilities, none of them comforting. I could barely remember to breathe. The rain made the world feel isolated, as though the gas station, the road, and the truck existed in a bubble that had no connection to the rest of the world. I couldn't see any other cars, any other people. Just me and the truck in the rain. Finally, movement. A clerk stepped out of the gas station, holding a flashlight. Their figure was small against the bright yellow glow of the station lights, but the sight brought an overwhelming sense of relief. I watched the clerk move toward the building, where the truck started to slowly drive away, its lights dimming as it turned back onto the highway. I didn't move immediately. I stayed in my car for several more minutes, gripping the wheel, heart still racing, waiting until the truck was far enough away that I could no longer see the lights. Even as I started my car and pulled back onto the road, I was shaking. My hands were slick with sweat despite the rain, and my chest felt tight. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the truck reappear, following me again. But it didn't. The rest of the drive home was tense and exhausting. Every flash of headlights in the distance made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to stretch out of the darkness and toward my car. My mind kept replaying the moment at the gas station, the dark cab, the idle engine. Why had it followed me? Why had no one been in sight? The questions circled relentlessly, unanswered. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was exhausted in a way I had never been before. I sat in my car for several minutes, engine running, staring out into the rain, trying to let my body stop trembling. Eventually, I stepped out, shutting the door slowly, and went inside. I kept checking the windows, peering out into the darkness and rain, even though I knew there was nothing there. My body was tense for hours, muscles tight, heart still racing. I couldn't shake the memory of the truck, the way it had matched my speed exactly, the way it had stayed behind me no matter what I did. In the following days, I avoided that route entirely at night. I took longer roads, even if they added time to my drive. Every time I drove near that highway, even in daylight, I felt a chill in my chest. The memory of that night stayed with me, vivid and unsettling. I never saw that truck again, never figured out why it had followed me. It could have been coincidence, a coincidence that terrified me, or it could have been something more deliberate. I didn't take the chance to find out. I learned something that night about fear and caution, about how quickly a situation can feel threatening and beyond control. The experience stayed with me, etched into memory with a sharp clarity. Driving at night on that stretch of highway was never the same. I made a habit of leaving earlier, driving safer routes, and always being aware of my surroundings. That night, the rain, the empty road, and the presence of that truck taught me a lesson I would never forget. Sometimes danger isn't obvious, and sometimes it follows quietly, leaving you alone to wait and hope that it will pass. Even now, years later, I still think about it when I hear the rain tapping on the roof of my car, when I see headlights flicker in the distance, when I drive rural roads alone at night. The fear doesn't feel as immediate as it did that night, but it never fully disappears. I drive cautiously, always alert, and I avoid that highway after dark. I know that what happened was real. I know that the memory is something that stays with you because it matters, because it reminds you that the world can be unpredictable and that you have to be careful. And I will never, ever take that risk again.